Imagine taking your final breath in a world before civilizations, laws, structures, or religions existed. The sensory landscape around you dissolves. The crackle of the campfire fades into a distant hum. The dense canopy of the prehistoric forest blurs into darkness. Your consciousness slips away. Your heart stops, and your physical form grows cold. Now, imagine your spirit hovering above the scene, looking down at the small nomadic band of hunter-gatherers you called your family. They are not weeping in a way you would recognize. They are not gathering shovels to dig a deep grave in consecrated ground. Instead, you see them reaching for their everyday survival equipment. They are sharpening razor-sharp stone blades, gathering in a tight circle around your cold, unmoving flesh, and preparing to consume you piece by piece. To our modern sensibilities, conditioned by centuries of cultural evolution, legal frameworks, and religious traditions, this scenario reads like the script of an absolute horror movie. It triggers an immediate visceral reaction of disgust, terror, and moral outrage. But as modern archaeologists, anthropologists, and geneticists dig deeper into forgotten, silent layers of human prehistory, they are uncovering a reality that is infinitely more complex, deeply unsettling, and surprisingly beautiful than we ever imagined. When a human being died in the deep Stone Age, what do we actually do with them? Do we simply discard them like biological waste, bury them beneath tears and flowers, or turn them into a meal? The answers provided by science reveal that our ancestors did all of these things. But the motivations driving their actions challenge the very definition of what it means to be human. For a long time, early historians and Victorian-era archaeologists operated under a comforting, elitist assumption. They believed that primitive humans were crude, unfeeling brutes who possessed no concept of grief, no capacity for symbolic thought, and no inkling of an afterlife. They assumed that before the dawn of organized agriculture and civilization, dead bodies were simply abandoned where they fell, left to be torn apart by scavengers while the living moved on without a backward glance. However, the modern chemistry and anatomy of ancient soil have completely shattered this narrative. The dirt has memory, and it tells a story of profound emotional depth. Long before the construction of the Egyptian pyramids, long before the first stones of Stonehenge were dragged across the British landscape, and long before the first cities were settled in the Fertile Crescent, prehistoric humans were already practicing deliberate, meticulous, and emotionally charged burials. We now know that our ancestors treated death not just as a biological end, but as a profound transition that required ritual intervention. To understand how far back this emotional intelligence goes, we have to look at the archaeological records of early modern humans, asterisk Homo sapiens asterisk, and our closely related evolutionary cousins, the Neanderthals, asterisk Homo neanderthalensis asterisk. One of the most monumental discoveries proving this capacity for grief was found in northern Israel, at a cave site known as Kafsa. Here, archaeologists excavated the graves of early modern humans dating back an astonishing 100,000 years. Among the remains was a skeleton of a young teenager, roughly 13 years old. This child wasn't just tossed into a hole to clear up space in the cave. The body had been placed carefully in a flexed, fetal position, nestled tightly in the child's hands, and laid across their chest were the massive, intact antlers of a red deer. This was a deliberate, highly symbolic gesture. The antlers served no practical purpose for a corpse. Their inclusion in the grave required effort, planning, and intent. It was an unmistakable expression of symbolic thought, a physical manifestation of community, trying to offer protection, status, or sustenance to a young soul embarked on a journey into an unknown afterlife. For decades, skeptics argued that this emotional complexity was a unique trait of Homo sapiens, and that other ancient hominid species lacked the mental capacity for such sentimentality. That theory was permanently laid to rest at the famous Shanidar cave site, nestled in the Zagros Mountains of Iraqi Kurdistan. Between 1957 and 1960, archaeologist Ralph Seletsky uncovered 9 Neanderthal skeletons buried inside the cave, dating back roughly 60,000 years. One specific skeleton, cataloged as Shanidar 4, revolutionized our understanding of Neanderthal psychology. When scientists analyzed the soil samples surrounding the bones using modern palynology, the study of fossilized pollen, they discovered something that shocked the scientific community. The sediment contained incredibly high concentrations of pollen from specific wild blossoms, including yarrow, cornflower, bachelor's button, hollyhock, and St. Barnaby's thistle. These weren't random weeds that blew into the cave by accident. These were plants known for their vibrant colors and medicinal properties. The data suggested that 60,000 years ago, a group of Neanderthals stood inside a dark, cold cave, weeping over the loss of a companion, and deliberately blanketed their dead body in a bed of bright, colorful wildflowers. They possess a profound, empathetic understanding of mortality. They recognized that even though the breath had left the body, the individual still mattered, and their memory deserved to be preserved with beauty. As the Paleolithic era progressed into the Upper Paleolithic and Mesolithic periods, these burial practices became increasingly elaborate. Humans began decorating their dead with a level of intensity that rivals modern high-fashion ornamentation. At the 30,000-year-old Upper Paleolithic site of Sungir in Russia, archaeologists discovered the graves of an adult man and 2 young children. They were buried with thousands of meticulously carved ivory beads, which had been sewn onto their clothing like intricate armor. The adult male alone was adorned with nearly 3,000 beads, while the children were covered in over 5,000 beads, alongside ivory rings and Arctic fox teeth to war at. When you calculate the time required to carve a single ivory bead using primitive stone tools, roughly an hour per bead, it becomes clear that this prehistoric community invested thousands of hours of intense, focused physical labor just to decorate the bodies of dead children. This wasn't the behavior of desperate, starving brutes clinging to survival. This was the behavior of a deeply cultured, wealthy, and emotionally sophisticated society that used material art to honor the dead. Yet, alongside these beautiful stories of flowers and ivory beads, archaeology has also forced us to confront a much darker, highly controversial aspect of our evolutionary story. In various prehistoric sites spanning different continents and hundreds of thousands of years, scientists have unearthed human remains that tell a completely different, violent tale. At the Grand Olina cave site in Atapuerca, Spain, researchers discovered the fossilized remains of an ancient human species called Homo antecessor, dating back an incredible 800,000 years. When these ancient bones were examined under modern forensic microscopes, the findings sent shockwaves to the field of anthropology. The bones were not intact, and they showed no signs of a respectful burial. Instead, they were heavily fractured, split wide open to extract the nutrient-rich bone marrow inside, and covered in distinct, unmistakable slice marks. These cuts were located precisely where muscle tissues attached to the bone, matching the exact butchery pattern seen on the remains of wild horses and deer found at the same site. The marks were left behind by razor-sharp flint knives wielded by human hands. This was undeniable evidence of cannibalism, occurring at the very dawn of human evolution. For a long time, researchers tried to dismiss these findings as isolated incidents of extreme madness or primitive savagery. They argued that as humans evolved and became more advanced, this horrific practice was left behind. But the timeline of archaeology proved them wrong. Cannibalism didn't disappear as humans grew more intelligent. In some regions, it became highly specialized. Consider the famous discoveries at Gough's Cave in Cheddar Gorge, England, which dates back roughly 15,000 years to the Magdalenian culture of the late Paleolithic era. The human remains found inside this cave represent some of the most meticulously processed skeletal material in archaeological history. Scientists found the bones of adults, adolescents, and young children mixed together. Nearly 40% of the bones showed clear evidence of human tooth marks, indicating that the flesh had been chewed directly off the bone by other humans. Long bones had been systematically smashed with heavy stones to get to the marrow. But the most staggering find at Gough's Cave was the treatment of the skulls. Forensic analysis revealed that after the individuals died, their heads were carefully severed from their necks. The skin, muscle, and soft tissue were cleanly scraped away using flint tools. The facial bones were then meticulously broken off, leaving only the vault of the skull intact. The edges of these skull vaults were then carefully chipped and smoothed down to create functional, polished drinking vessels, known to science as skull cups.